So this ties into some of the stories we wanted to talk about regarding Hollywood actors. Just recently, CAA came out and warned against AI in Hollywood in films. So like, what are your thoughts on this?
So let's put that into context. So Sora is a ChatGPT OpenAI tool, and they kind of went with the easier to ask forgiveness than permission. They kind of said, we're going to include media companies' intellectual property, IP, in training Sora so that it could generate things. So a lot of issues here. To be clear, nobody, at least not me, is saying like, F the children, like screw the creatives. Like that's not at all what's happening. But to think that like Disney or Fox cares about talent, I think is a false premise to begin with, right? Apart from A-listers, apart from the face on the network, the 6 o'clock news, like the stars, media companies have been sodomizing their employees for the last few decades now in a clear one-way direction. They will look at violating rules and breaking laws, and that's just, I think, their default mode, right? Partly because everybody wants to be a storyteller, everybody wants to work in the recording industry, everybody wants to make movies. So they definitely exploit that demand and supply, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. So, but there's a difference between Disney saying, well, we own this IP, Disney or MCU, and we'll make decisions, versus another company, in this case, a technology company, OpenAI, coming along and giving itself permission. So I definitely disagree with that whole Bay Area ethos of, hey, man, we're going to do what we want, move fast, break things, and, too bad. But that is the ethos of these builders, entrepreneurs, engineers, investors. They don't care, right? Google indexed the web, and it was like websites were kind of screwed. They wanted the traffic, but were they okay if Google indexed all their websites and got access to their intellectual property? If you fast forward 20 years, Google's now extracting that information and showing snippets of the data you're searching. And this is why owned and operated websites are in a state of like perpetual decline, because there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. If I'm looking for how long to put this chicken pot pie in an oven, what temperature, I don't go to the website and hear about the author growing up in Vermont and the grandma made this. And it's like, nobody.
As nice as that is.
Yeah. So the idea is that obviously these media companies have seen the rise of YouTube, they've seen Facebook, they've seen Google, and they're trying not to replicate, repeat history. Now, for CAA, whom in theory are our agents, because we were rep by ICM and CAA bought ICM. So this is really not about CAA, but I did want to disclose that. William Morris has come out and said the same thing. I think this says maybe a bit more about the agency business, because agents ultimately historically made 15% on deals they brought you. Sometimes it's lower, 5-10%, whatever. But my point is, if you were to have, let's say, Cameron Diaz, let's use Cameron Diaz. So she's a person. She doesn't even own the IP of the movies, but I want to use her for, you'll see why. Let's say Cameron Diaz, who I heard quit acting because she was tired of the sexism or whatever, unless I'm wrong. But let's say Cameron Diaz, it's her body, it's her likeness, it's her agency. If she were to say OpenAI or Facebook, here is my likeness. You cannot do obviously porn. You cannot do anything political. I'm not taking stance. But you can use me in news broadcast snippets or scripted ideas that I approve. You could use me even in ads. Again, I want to approve. Just cut me a check. The agencies are a bit squeezed here because the value that they provide is quantifiable, no doubt. But agents only make money when there's a clear notional amount. Like, we're paying you $1 million. Okay, our fee's $150K.
Yeah.
But in a world where the technology companies want to be the clearinghouse of everything, commerce, content, community, exchanges, whatever, I think a lot of the agents are also just freaking out saying, yeah, it's too speculative. There may be money, but you don't want to give away, the milk because nobody's going to buy the cow type of thing.
Yeah. So it's the middlemen who are kind of getting cut out of this. What about this actress Tilly Norwood, who's emerged and she's being touted at she touted as the first AI actress that has people in an outrage saying, "What is this? This isn't she's not a real person. Like, she doesn't count as an actress. How could this be?"
So this is actually a bit more complicated for a few reasons. So when there was the strike in Hollywood, the creative community was freaking out over the past, meaning all the streaming revenue. Like when Netflix buys a show, they just give you your budget plus, let's say, 15 or 30% markup, I think. But they don't really give you royalty residual. It's a pain to manage. Why would they have leverage? But so one concern was, well, what about royalties on streaming, which is now big business, and you're putting a lot of projects on streaming versus theatrical and whatever. But let's not discuss that. The second one was AI. That was the future. They were like, oh my God, we see what's happening. So I fully encourage the creative community to stand up and say, no, that's their right. But that is very much the incumbents. Those are the celebrities and the stars. In the near term, I don't think anybody wants to see like a feature film with an AI actress. But the same way that nobody in Hollywood, also the agents told Hollywood don't embrace YouTube, and now they're fucked. So that was bad advice, but it was because YouTube didn't give a check. It was revenue share, right? So let's call a spade a spade. But so understandably, the same way that a lot of people are not going to embrace this, they're going to basically make themselves irrelevant to the younger audiences. And as consumer behavior changes, people thought YouTube was weird. Not anymore. I thought Roblox. I have a ton of shares in Roblox. I don't think I've ever logged in. I'm a big believer. I don't get it. I get it as a business. I don't get same way. I personally at 47 don't care about Tilly Norwood. But if I was 17 or even 27 and I start growing up with these characters, I'm going to develop that rapport with them. Now, Hollywood near term is not replacing Tom Cruise, is not replacing whichever hot babe they pay $25 million yet. But yes, the extras, all the other people, that is where the issue comes up. Now, where I do think is a bit, we talked about censorship, and that's being the government punishing you, not a company. I have nothing against Javier Bardem, who's a very good actor. I also respect anybody that takes any stance that could harm their paycheck regardless. I'm not saying I agree with them or disagree, but anybody who will say, screw my paycheck, I'm going to take a stand on principle, I am not here to cast a stone. But if you are, let me give you a kind of a crazy, purposely not trying to be shock here. Let's say you are a studio boss. This is a bit purposely. You think Javier Bardem would have been your gardener if it was not for you having made them into a star. You may or may not be Jewish. You wake up and you see Javier Bardem that in your eyes you created into somebody who's not an Uber driver, nothing wrong with that, or your gardener. And he goes out there and says, Israel is bad, Palestine is this, screw you, screw that. I guarantee you that studio head goes, F this guy. And F all these actors who are nobodies. We take the risk. We take the risk to produce these movies. We fund their marketing. We send them everywhere. And now they're using their fame to become political, which does two things. In general, it alienates half the audience. All of a sudden, Gal Gadot cannot be cast because if she's Israeli, the crazies on one side go and attack her. And if Javier Bardem says, no, that side is crazy, a bunch of others go, well, this guy's a bum. We don't like him. We're boycotting the movie. So yes, I don't think it's right. But given what people do themselves, in this case, actors, I understand why studios are like, screw this, we need plan B. There's no reason why we hire 100 extras, have to buy them food, have to have extra insurance. We could use AI. So what is happening now is the water is not boiling yet, and Hollywood thinks we are special, people like us. You're not that special. You're special, but not that special. So I think what's happening is that water is going to get hotter and hotter. AI will replace a lot of the extras. AI will hire a lot of things. We'll setting scenes. We'll do it whether we like it or not. It is inevitable to some extent. But yeah, the big names are going to be protected. But think of all the directors, that produced movies, and then it turns out they grabbed their assistant's butt, and then they got canceled because of Me Too. The movie ends. Yeah, you better believe it. Studios, if they had half a brain, they would be doing this faster. Not saying I agree with it, but I'm not here to tell you always what's right. I'm also telling you like how people think. So it's undoubtable that this is where things are going.